Let's talk about Christian Braun. His middle name is Nicholas, right? Christian Nicholas Braun. Christian Braun and Peyton Watson are extension eligible this summer for rookie scale extensions. I am worried about what those numbers would be. However, the landscape that has been shaking out over the last month or so with respect to other rookie scale extensions from their draft class is kind of making me question my level of concern, right? The 2022 draft class in the first round, guys, anyway, have largely been unpaid, right? Yet to be paid, with the exception of just a few guys. Obviously, the big name max contract guys like Paolo, J-Dub, and Chet have all been paid. They've all these guys have 25% rookie scale max extensions guaranteed. Paolo, if he made all NBA, could make up to 30%. Same thing with J-Dub. Chet has no escalators in his contract, as Will alluded to earlier, so that's annoying. So I'm like, man, if Chet made all NBA, that would put OKC in a financial bind. But it's not going to happen because he has no escalators in his contract. He can make all NBA, and it wouldn't cost them anything extra. Jabari Smith Jr., third overall pick in that draft class, has also been paid. We talked about his contract as a potential comp for Christian Braun in on an earlier show in this podcast, because I think he's making right around 20% of the salary cap. Might be closer to 19. Oh no, I'm looking at it right now. It's way less. 20 million is more like the actual number. He's probably making right around an average of 12.5% of the cap over the 5 years of this extension, which is like a really good number. I feel like we've been talking about Christian Braun as a potential 18 to 20% of the cap guy. That would be like, oh, I wouldn't love that percentage. I love a 12.5% of the cap. That's awesome.
It's a lot better.
So those guys have all been paid. I actually think in terms of player archetypes, Dyson Daniels, Keegan Murray, and Tari Eason, also members of the 2022 draft class, are better comps for Peyton and Christian's sort of roles, right? You've got these tenacious, at least in terms of their ideal form, tenacious defensive wings that may or may not be a two-way player. And we can argue about that when it comes to like a Dyson Daniels and Tari Eason type. Keegan is more like, doesn't do any one thing at a super high level, but is like a do-it-all kind of wing, right? Maybe more similar to Christian Braun. So I think Keegan is probably the best comp of the three for Christian Braun. He's been starting in his career since his rookie year. So he's been a starter for 3 years. Christian has only been starting for 1, but the two of them fulfill that similar role as this like fifth starter that does a little bit of everything, whatever's, needed from them based on whoever else is in the lineup, right? And I think in terms of impact, despite the difference in the amount of time that they've both been starters, their impact has actually converged. And I wouldn't even fault you for thinking that Christian is better than Keegan at this point, although I think Keegan is more versatile. I think Christian does a couple things at a higher level than any one thing that Keegan does. So that's just they're arguably in the same tier. Keegan had a bigger role before last season when they got DeRozan, right? The Kings basically said, hey, can you turn into just our two-way defensive wing starting your second year? And then they went full speed ahead into I don't want to say pigeonhole, but let's very much refine and restrict. Let's restrict Keegan's role a bit so that he can just do that thing. And I don't think that was intentional on the Kings' part either. They were like, let's just build a team with DeMar DeRozan for some reason, and De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis, and it's going to be weird. And then make it weirder by adding Zach LaVine. Sure, whatever, right? Um, but what do you think about that comp before we move on to one of the other ones in terms of like both these guys haven't been paid, obviously, right? We're waiting on Christian Braun's extension. We're waiting on Keegan Murray's. But what do you think about Keegan as a potential comp for Christian? And how far apart would you expect their contract extensions to be?
I just like the Kings have so much more room to give Keegan an extension. Like he's
Do
a
they?
more yeah. I just think with his outlook, their team outlook, they don't have pressure to be contending for titles. I think Keegan is a young, kind of promising, exciting player that has shown more on offense than CB or Pwat, I think,
Right.
unfortunately.
Keegan
And
almost broke Klay Thompson's single game record for made threes in that one game against the Jazz. He had that was a 50-point game, I believe. His second year. Christian has obviously never done something like that.
mhm.
This was back when he had a bigger role in the offense before they got to Rosen, obviously.
Right. And CB is like, yes, he's been starting less. Now he's in the starting role, but he's on a contending team. He plays a specific role for us in terms of being a defensive minded player where we have a lot of offensive first players, but he's going to have to be able to shoot. And that's still a question. It's not deterring me so much as it would other people. I get it's a worry that you don't believe in his shot at all. I'm just like, we have to keep CB at this point. And if you're in a position where you want them to keep developing, they're not in their ideal form yet, as you've said. And I think CB's closer to where he needs to be than Pwat, obviously, because he's been contributing so much more.
Yeah.
I'm more willing to just kind of see where things settle with CB and take a risk than I am on Pwat, even if Pwat's getting a much lower extension by comparison.
But specifically Christian and Keegan, like who would you expect to get paid more? So you're saying Keegan because the Kings have
Yeah.
a less pressure on
Yeah, and I
spending
think
and
the
whatever?
Nuggets have to try to like penny pinch a little bit with CB.
I do think that that's a double-edged sword with the like which team has more sort of margin for error or whatever with like the amount that they could pay this guy. The Kings are not expected to be competitive, but that's also a reason that they would not want to be in the luxury tax. Like they have no reason to spend even that much money. Whereas the Nuggets are like, well, we're supposed to be a competitive team. We're going to spend well into the luxury tax to
Yeah.
keep like a competitive team going. Um, and they've got a lot of, well, eventually expiring, but as of right now, not great contracts on the books when you're talking about Zach LaVine with another, I believe, 2 years left in his deal. He's not expiring yet. So yeah, 2 more seasons, including a player option. DeMar DeRozan isn't on a max contract, but Domantas Sabonis is on like a near max, right? It would be like something akin to a rookie max if you took that kind of money. There's all these guys also that are below the veteran max, but they are veteran players, but they make more than the rookie scale max extension that you could consider in that max range, right? So Zach LaVine and Sabonis would both be those guys, and LaVine's making an actual veteran maximum contract right now. They're paying a lot of guys in the double figures in terms of well over $10 million, whereas the Nuggets don't have as many guys that make that just because a lot of our money is more concentrated at the top. Uh, so it's difficult actually to see where a lot of the money for Keegan would come from if they're a team that's trying to stay out of the tax. Just from that particular
Yeah, because you
perspective.
really don't want to be there if you don't have a reason for it. So I get that.
Now, I don't think that they would necessarily shortchange Keegan to stay out of the tax. I think they'd probably just trade these other players. So to your point, they're like, well, we're trying to be like competitive-ish, but we don't have pressure to like keep Zach LaVine or
mhm.
keep DeMar DeRozan more likely because I don't think that it'd be easy to trade Zach LaVine's contract just because it's so big.
God, it is a really good comparison. I mean,
Yeah.
I think of Keegan as a better 3-point shooter for some reason, but they're really not so different, are they? When you look at it.
Yeah, I think, and they both struggle with hesitating on those shots, right? I think I've talked on the show about this one scene from last season where Keegan, I think it was a game against the Lakers, if I believe. Yes, it might have been overtime against the Lakers. And Keegan runs a handoff with, I believe it was Domas, and he hesitates on the shot. It's wide open, doesn't take the shot, tries to drive it, ends up like passing to somebody else, whatever. And Mike Braun calls Sasha Vezenkov off the bench and tells him to get ready to check into the game, almost like threatening Keegan to be subbed out of the game in that way. And on the very next possession, Keegan takes and makes the same shot. And then Mike Braun sends Sasha back to the bench. And that was something that Mike Braun was always trying to instill in him, is that consistent aggressiveness or aggression, I should say, when it comes to hunting his own shot. He's got talent in that regard. And I saw it. I saw it when he played in the NBA. I saw it when he played in Summer League. But both of these guys struggle with consistent aggression. It's kind of what makes them good fifth starters. They kind of stay out of the way. But when you've got a team like the Kings have, where everybody else is super high usage on ball dudes, and you're not the aggressive guy, you're not going to get the touches. And so Keegan did have a down year. Let's talk a little bit about Dyson Daniels, who you might say is an even better comp for Christian Braun, because they both went from being bench guys to starters in their third year and had really steep increases in terms of their overall impact, and showed that they were able to handle a starting role, at least in terms of the volume. Like, they had no problem playing the minutes. They did the thing, whatever. Obviously, Dyson took a more defensive-minded approach to, his, new role as a starter, right? Led the league in steals by a wide margin. Got a lot of Defensive Player of the Year votes. I thought that was a bit of a joke. I think it's kind of crazy that he came in second, just because of all the steals. And the steals are hard to do, but I don't think that he had the same level of defensive impact as some of the other guys in the running. But I'm just kind of glad that he didn't win, because I thought that would have been really bad. Well, if you could bring up the Christian Braun DARKO comparison here. I've actually got the DARKO DPM chart, which is like one of these more trusted all-in-one metrics. And these are all guys, again, who were drafted in the 2022 draft. And so you've got the season by season comparison for these guys. And you see Christian Braun and Dyson Daniels are on similar trajectories as of right now. And Keegan Murray was actually closer to, where it's kind of impressive how high Dyson Daniels was, despite being just a bench player in New Orleans for those first 2 years. And then he just skyrocketed once he was given the starting role. But Keegan sort of stagnated over this last year as his role diminished, let's say. Will, do you note, is there anything about this chart that stands out to you about trying to compare these three guys and who you think should be paid more or less? I expect all these guys to get at least 4-year deals, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if at least one of them got a 5-year deal with whatever team.
Dyson Daniels, his stock is super high. I mean, you just saw with those defensive.
He's a darling of NBA Twitter too.
Yeah, he really is. But that's what's more shocking to me. I thought there'd be a little more definitive data to show Dyson Daniels is more valuable than Christian Braun by perception. But based on the DARKO and based on just looking at their percentiles and how they grade out, even on B-ball index or something like that, CB is right there with Dyson Daniels, and better in some instances. He seems like a better rebounder, seems like better interior defender, and he's a better
finisher for sure.
CB's definitely better at the rim. He's going to have the edge over a lot of players that you're comparing him to at his level.
It's so crazy how much you can boost your impact just by making your damn layups, guys.
And playing.
If there was
Jokic.
One skill, I could say Peyton Watson. If you get better at literally nothing else, just make your layups. That would be incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately, double your potential contract value that way.
Yeah, CB has really good defensive versatility, and they're all pretty similar on the 3-point shot. Dyson Daniels is not great.
Right, but he's probably the best on-ball guy of the three. Even maybe not, because he doesn't really shoot, but he's got the most. I think he's got the most reliable floater of these guys. And like Keegan all three of them like don't look at the rim when they have the ball. This
Yeah,
is
that's
like
so true.
this is like the thing with all three of these guys, and why I think they're good like comps with each other, and why I'm sort of wondering like, are the Kings, Nuggets, and Hawks just sort of in a standoff right now, waiting to see what somebody
Who's
else
gonna
pays
set the
the other
market?
guy so that they can, so they
Yeah,
can,
Dyson's
set the
mid-range
market
game
that way.
is more reliable than CB for sure. If it's a floater or a jumper, and I don't think CB takes many jumpers for the mid-range. Obviously, that would be strange because he's dunking it or shooting threes. But yeah, I'm encouraged by this discussion. Like I said, I don't have like
Because
a
you
number.
have some level of respect for both Dyson and Keegan, that you're like,
Yeah,
Christian,
but they
potentially
both
better
have
than those
they
guys, but at least
all
it's good, it
have
seems.
yeah, they all have some weaknesses, and it's
Yeah.
has to do with shooting. But their defense is amazing, and I love watching CB. He's explosive, he's exciting, he's a cutter, he plays well with Jokic, he can push the pace if you want to, and he offers ability to defend wings. And I like CB. I'm just like kind of less stressed about the CB number. I don't really care what it's going to be. Obviously, it's not going to be a max that's 30%. We're not talking about that. We're talking more 18 down to 12 range. And I just want to see where it lands. But I'm not going to be too concerned about it or fret over it or think it's going to handicap the Nuggets severely in any way. Like, I'm really not that worried about CB.
News comes out tomorrow that the Kings are giving Keegan Murray 4 years, $120 million. What's your reaction? That's 30 mil.
That's like what people have been preparing people for, and 30 mil's not going to
No,
look
I'm
as
not
much
prepared.
later.
I'm not prepared. I'm fighting back. I'm rebelling. My preparation is batting down the hatchets, the hatches, not
Hatches.
hatches. I should also batten down the hatches. Well, Herb is a veteran. That's a veteran extension, so that's not the same as a rookie scale player. The difference between a veteran extension, even though I think Herb Jones could be like a good comp, or not a comp, but an anchor for like, I probably think that like Herb Jones is probably a better player than Christian Braun. The difference with a rookie scale contract extension is you're paying also for upside, especially in the case of both Dyson and Christian, who haven't been starters for that long. You can kind of talk yourself into, we haven't seen the best of this guy yet. Herb Jones is going to be making 12.5% of the cap. So similar to Jabari Smith Jr., right? So that's a number I would be happy with too. But you have to make the argument to Christian for that, right? Because he could obviously like wait, maybe he's be like, I'm going to have an even better year, and then you're going to want to pay me $30 million a year, and then that's not fun, right? Especially if he's not going to play defense all year again. But the other way that you could get that kind of deal done is say, we're going to give you a longer extension than we would give an older player, because you're young. We expect you to be relatively healthy. We don't expect you to break down and be washed by the end of this deal, whatever. So we're going to commit to you, give you a longer deal, and you're going to take slightly less off the annual value because we're willing to commit X amount of money to you, which is the other benefit to thinking about these rookie scale extensions.
But do you like 22 a year? I know it's more percent of the cap, but 22 a year.
The number is, that's fine. That's fine with me. I think when we talked about it at the beginning of the summer, it was like, I don't love 25, but if it happened, like, you live with it. Anything like 23 is like my sweet spot number, where I like, in terms of annual value, 23 million a year is where I'd be like, I'm happy with this. Anything under that, I'm like, oh, we're extracting value now. Anything above that, up to 25, I'm like, okay, we lost a little bit here, but like, it's reasonable. Like, I could see why it would happen. Especially, we were talking about these numbers before the MPJ trade. Denver created a little bit more flexibility for themselves next season with respect to trying to stay under the second apron and all that stuff. So they have a little bit more room to play with, but I wouldn't want to like blow all of that just like necessarily giving all of it to Christian Braun, right? But it does take some pressure off of what that annual number could be.
Look, and the last thing I'll say on CB is I'm a huge CB fan. Love watching him play. So it could make me biased that I don't care about the number as much, and I just like trust Ben Wallace based on what they've shown that they're going to know what's best for the team and CB.
No, I don't trust Ben Wallace.
Full
They
faith
haven't done a
in Ben
contract
Wallace.
extension yet. I don't know how they pay guys.
Hey, they didn't.
I've seen them make a trade.
They hadn't done an NBA offseason before, and then they just crushed it.
Well, it's not over yet because they still have to do these extensions.
Yeah. Those like consequences will come down into other seasons. They really screw this up. But for this season, we're locked into what these guys are going to do. But I just trust them. I think CB is going to be really good. But I do get that if players don't start respecting his shot on the court, something's going to have to be done about that. Because I don't want people to be helping off CB so easily and locking down any driving lanes or other playmaking opportunities for Cam and Jamal or whoever it is. So it's definitely a concern. I'm not saying his shot's there and I'm 100% like confident in it, and you guys should be too. Like, we're going to see how it plays out. But everything else that he brings, I really like.
But let's talk about Peyton Watson's potential contract extension and comps. I looked up some stuff about Tari Eason because I think that he might be the most interesting comp here. The reason that it's interesting to me that so many 2022 draftees haven't yet signed their extensions is because I thought by now I would have some idea of what the number was going to be for both Christian and Peyton based on these other guys in their draft class and what they were getting paid. Tari Eason is one in particular that has surprised me that it hasn't happened. Not because it's not necessarily uncommon for these types of extensions to happen toward the end of the off season, and I'm talking about like the day before the first game of the season, as was the case for Sinaji when he got his extension. But the Rockets have already extended somebody from that same draft class, as we talked about, in Jabari Smith Jr. So the fact that they haven't extended Tari Eason yet is interesting to me because I just sort of expected them to like, okay, this is just how this organization is doing their business. Does this indicate that they might not pay Tari Eason this summer? Does it indicate that they want to wait and take him to restricted free agency? That would surprise me a bit because I feel like Tari is probably just going to make a lot less money than any of us think just because of the health stuff. He hasn't been able to stay on the floor for a large chunk of his first 3 seasons in the NBA. And I think that is not good for him, obviously, and it's not good for the organization, but it gives the organization a leverage point in contract negotiations because it gives Tari an incentive to try to lock in any kind of guaranteed money that he can, just in case health stuff happens down the line that could reduce, his potential value. Whoa, Vyacheslav, you are way off on that. Way off on that. I don't know what Ime's relationship is to Tari Eason, but to my knowledge and like my observation, when Tari has been healthy, he's played. It's not like Ime is benching him when he's healthy. And I feel like when he's played, he's been spectacular. He defends at a super elite level, and he's shown that he's basically what Golden State wishes they had out of Jonathan Kuminga. Like, no question, right? He's a defensive wing, great defensive wing, who is worse than Kuminga on offense, for sure, in terms of like having a bag and for overall versatility. But again, he defends. He does all the little things, including rebounding. He has great feel for the game. He's a good connective passer as well. But if Tari Eason ends up taking something around like mid-level exception money, as Ryan Blackburn of Mile High Sports and Locked On Nuggets has indicated would be a reasonable deal for Peyton Watson to accept, 4 years, $60 million. I wouldn't love that for Denver. I'm sure, I don't know how Peyton would feel about that, but I feel like he should be pretty ecstatic about it. I feel like if Tari takes that money, then Peyton is kind of in a corner because he's definitively a worse player than Tari Eason on both ends of the floor. I completely disagree with Vyacheslav. I think, well, depending on how you grade out Peyton as a defender, maybe you don't feel that great about him, so it's like whatever. All right. So I I left Tari Eason off of this graphic. This is the DARKO DPM chart for Christian Braun, Peyton Watson, who's in red. And you saw that he and Christian were on pretty similar trajectories their first 2 years up until that last chunk of the 23-24 season, which is right around the time that Calvin Booth himself even referenced that Peyton Watson was sort of inconsistent in the way that he ended the season, and he needed to be more consistent in his preparation and all this stuff, and obviously has a relatively down year, with the exception of a few highs in the middle of the season, this past season with Peyton Watson, but still nowhere near the impact of guys like Christian Braun and Dyson Daniels, who were obviously starting for their new teams, right? The reason I left Tari Eason off of this graphic is because he was well above all of these guys in terms of DARKO DPM impact when he's on the floor, which is insane because he's coming off the bench, and I believe he has since his second year, because I think he might have been starting when the Rockets were all rookies, when they were like a nasty team. But yeah, he's like well off the charts for all these things in terms of impact. He's got an insane steal rate. And he, like I said, he's a two-way player. Like, you don't worry about Tari being able to make layups, for example, right? And that's enough to boost your offensive impact metrics by a lot, just because a lot of rookies and like young players do struggle with that particular thing. So if you can do it, it raises you like a cut above the rest, which I think is a big reason why Christian's impact numbers are what they are right now. Will, when you hear everything I'm saying about Tari Eason and you look at like where Peyton stands relative to that, the impact metrics of these other guys that have been given starter opportunity, do you lean more towards Peyton could be that if he were or had been given more opportunity, and so he probably should be paid closer to what you would pay these other guys? Or, and again, I comped him to Tari, and I should have just included the Tari bar on there so you could see. But he's a guy who's been coming off the bench and is still able to make substantially greater positive impact, and is probably going to get paid less than Christian and Dyson because of the health things, right? And the fact that he's seen, at least in his current system, as a bench player, probably in large part because of the health stuff, like just not being able to stay on the floor consistently. But do you lean more towards Peyton would be able to do more and like be on that same trajectory as Christian? Like we saw, like they started to diverge when Christian was given more opportunity? Or do you think, look, this guy still has potential to like be better in the future, and you should account for that when you're thinking about his extension, but for now, he's definitely a tier below these other guys that we're talking about?
I still think he's a tier below. I'm not of the opinion that if Pwat was given more opportunity, he'd be in that Dyson CB category, because we've been desperate for contributors and for depth before we could even get a lot of the guys we got this offseason, and Pwat has never been able to really put a consistent product on the floor to stay on the floor. I don't think it was Malone's fault for not playing him enough. I don't think it was David Adelman's fault for not playing him enough in the playoffs, or for Malone not playing him in the playoffs before that. I think that if he was better, he would have been able to play more and would have earned more minutes. And I just seriously doubt his ability to keep developing. You can end up being higher on him if you want, because you can see some potential. His defense is there, and so you just want to add some more offensive attributes to his game, because then you have an amazing two-way player, and that's who we're desperate to have. But basically right now, he is a very, very good perimeter defensive player, and is a good, I don't know what the word, rim protector. Like his block rate's insane. So he has those two elements. Not a great rebounder. He can pick up fouls when he drives, but his free throw is not good, and his 3-point is not good, and his rim finishing is not good. So I'm pretty low on PWA right now.
We've talked about it even throughout the season. We were like, he's shown flashes of being able to do all of these things and hasn't been consistent in any of them, including and especially the stuff on the defensive side of the ball. Because like a first or second year Dyson Daniels coming off the bench for the Pelicans, he was not a good offensive player. They'd have him initiating offense sometimes, but dude didn't look at the basket, and he was basically guarded like slow-mo, right? It's not so he was not an offensive positive in that system, but he was such a good defender that they played him enough, right? Like nobody was complaining. There were times that Dyson would get like DNPs, but when he played, he usually played a lot. And when he didn't play, it was mostly because they had a bunch of other wings, defensive wings. Peyton's the only defensive wing that we have, like coming off the bench, that is like a high level defensive wing, at least in theory. So the fact that he hasn't been able to carve out a bigger role for himself, like I just don't think there's an excuse for that, right? It's really been about the consistency defensively more than anything. And obviously it would help if the offense weren't quite as rough as it is. Like he wouldn't have to be a 8 to 9 to 10 out of 10 defensive player every second on the floor if he were a slightly better offensive player. But it's like, okay, until you get there with your offense, the defense has to be at that level in order to stay on the floor for a competitive team. That's just like how it is in the NBA, right? We've talked a lot about Peyton Watson and his inconsistencies and what he's lacking in this summer. We've also talked about like his potential, and it's up the wazoo, because otherwise they would have traded him already if he didn't have the kind of potential that he had. They would have traded him already and just like gotten a couple of second round picks back, in my opinion. And who knows, that could end up happening down the line. But the reason is he's shown these flashes. The reason that we keep him, and everyone's talking about like, well, what would he be extended? Because if he hadn't shown these flashes, a player with this level of impact is not talked about as a guy that's going to get extended before restricted free agency. That's just not how it goes. In terms of overall impact, it just hasn't been there on any kind of consistent basis for him. But again, the flashes have been there. And so my question is, how much better do you think he's going to be this season? And is it worth it to try to lock him down now just because you think he's going to be better this season than he's been? Or, especially in light of the potential that the Houston Rockets, and I'm not saying they're going to do this, but they haven't extended him yet. But if they take Tari Eason to restricted free agency, again, there are other reasons to not take a player to restricted free agency. It's not a great locker room vibe. It's a very messy situation, as we've discussed very briefly in the case of Jonathan Kuminga, Josh Giddey, Cam Thomas, and Quentin Grimes, especially for a team that has title aspirations, right? But does it make sense? Like, Houston's also a team with title aspirations. What if they end up trading Tari Eason this summer? Then you like,
I don't know.
I have a lot of questions about this comp in particular, because I am surprised, given that they've paid Jabari, that Tari has not been extended yet.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good comp. I even looked at, I mean, these players have some big differences in ages and experience, but like even Isaac Okoro or like Haywood Highsmith.
Yeah. They don't have the draft. The difference between them and Peyton is draft pedigree.
Yeah,
like they are better players than Peyton.
If you,
I mean, actually, Okoro is a first round pick. Highsmith is the one that doesn't have the draft pedigree.
But if you like, don't look at age, or you don't look at draft pedigree or whatever, and you just like look at what they're producing, which I think is similar to what Pwat is, like maybe a give or take, obviously, because some of them are way better at some things and worse at other things. But Okoro's in the $11 million a year range. Highsmith's like $5.5 million a year range. And I don't know where those are going. And I don't know where Eason's contract's going. But for trying to find like similar comparisons to Pwat and theorize what could we be, I do see like that 11 as like the higher end, and the 5 million is obviously the much lower end. I don't know where we're going to end up, but I would love to have a more definitive comparable contract with any of those guys. And if they do go to unrestricted free agency with like Tari Eason, I would feel more comfortable. Yeah, to restricted free agency. I would feel more comfortable going to restricted free agency with Pwat, as shitty as a thing as that is. it can kind of make sense, but not that he's going
And
to be.
that's how they got Okoro on that number, is they took him to restricted free agency. That's how
So
the
there you
Cavs
go.
got him on that number before they traded him to Chicago. And again, that's what happens is you take a guy to restricted free agency because you're okay with him not necessarily walking for nothing, because obviously they can't. They're restricted. But you're okay with them hating you forever and then having to trade them, which I'm not saying happened with Okoro. I think they had other reasons to do that trade. But it's not like there was any love lost, it seems, between Okoro and the Cavs organization after that. After he again started over 50 games for them the season before they like took him to restricted free agency. And it's that season where they had a lot of injuries between Mobley, Garland, and then Mitchell and Allen for different parts of that season, right?
It's just another scenario where I think about Zeke, where you give out a contract because of what you think he's going to be. And I don't want to be in that situation with Pwat. Not that it'll be as bad as that, because we're not going to be
there's not going to be a player option.
Yeah, these player options and those things. And we've learned that lesson, but still, like, you got to think about it. And I'm kind of tired of giving out contracts to players when they haven't proved it yet. And even though we have questions about CB, I feel better about taking that risk than I do with Pwat, where I don't have really any reason to think he would improve this season or play significantly better, personally.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think that because of both the situation for the team and the situation for Peyton, it would probably be best to go with a shorter term deal. I would actually be okay with Denver getting Peyton signed on a deal that is similar to Isaac Okoro's, but not having to take him to restricted free agency to do it. Okoro has shown more, frankly, in terms of being a consistent NBA player than Peyton has. The difference is just, frankly, opportunity, especially after Okoro was removed from the starting lineup. I think Peyton just plays more than him, even though they're both coming off the bench. I need to double check the actual numbers on that, but I also don't, because I know how many guys the Cavs play. So 3-year deal. So basically 3 years, $33 million, I think, is around what Okoro got. And I'd be okay with that for Peyton. And here's the thing is, that removes the longer term upside for Denver, because if Peyton actualizes the kind of player that he can be, if these flashes turn into any kind of consistency, he's worth way more than that as a player. So you'd probably want him locked up for longer. What I would do, personally, the way I would structure this, is probably go with, especially because we have a little bit more flexibility due to the trading MPJ and having a little bit more room under the second apron in subsequent years. What I would do is probably something closer to 3 years, $45 million, or 3 years, like $48 million, and make the last year a team option. And frankly, I think Peyton should want, like, that would be my starting point. You probably end up with, like, the way that the two sides converge is probably a 3-year deal with no team option, but that's where I would start. If Denver wants to trade him at some point, probably to a team that values him enough that they're going to pay him on his subsequent contract, he should probably want that. And a team option being there makes it easier for Denver to do that. So he should not want a team option there, because obviously Denver or the team that trades for him could obviously decline that. Denver should want the team option, but there is an incentive there for Peyton to be on a more tradable deal. Plus, if Peyton does actualize his potential as a player, a 3-year deal is better for him than a 4-year deal, because he can enter unrestricted free agency sooner in the future and make more money based on whatever kind of player he becomes, right? And Denver or somebody else could pay him even more. But that, I would go with a 3-year deal, and ideally that 3rd year's a team option, and I would look at something like, what, 16 is high. The point of going a little bit higher on the annual value is to get Peyton to take a deal with a team option, right?
Yeah,
it's like a little incentive. Exactly. Maybe you don't go 16 million a year. Maybe you go with the 3 years, 45, but you front load it so that the first year is worth more, and then it's descending from there, and there's a team option. Like, that's what I would do. That's the kind of deal that they should have given to Zeke if they were going to give him a deal at all, which I argued that they shouldn't have. But if they were going to, that's the kind of deal it should have been. There's no point in having a 4-year descending contract with a player option on the last year. I will try to talk about less about Zeke's contract, but it's difficult when there are 3 years left on it.
It is funny too to try to get Pwat on a number that's less than Zeke, and he's like, obviously I'm better than Zeke. I'm actually playing and I'm on the same team, but such different circumstances. Yeah, 16 is super high. Nuggets fans are freaking out even about the prospect of paying him $12 million a year. Maybe more acceptable in the $11 million range, but I could see, front loading it and then have it some kind of descending on a shorter deal.
I think if you go over $14 million a year, that you're doing that in order to get them to accept a team option. And then you make the argument to the agent, like, look, this will make it easier to trade, and we will try to get you to a team that would be willing to pay you if we end up going that route.
Yeah. I mean, Pwat's probably going to have to sacrifice something along the lines. Like I don't think he's going to get exactly what he wants or would hope for, unfortunately, and hopefully he'll understand.
Well, what Denver is paying for, in my opinion, right now is just peace of mind. I don't think that Peyton is going to have a crazy market in restricted free agency next summer, because he is still going to be coming off the bench. We have a set starting lineup. It's not like there's going to be a competition that he could win to get starting level minutes or whatever. If there are injuries, he definitely will play, but he's going to be competing with Bruce Brown to fill minutes when there's an injury. He's going to be competing with Jonas Valanciunas to fill minutes when there's an injury. Competing with Tim Hardaway. There's a lot more competition at that wing, on that wing position, and so it's like I'm not worried about him massively outperforming expectations next year, even if he does improve as a player.
Yeah, it would be hard for me to imagine him outperforming it, to be honest. It's sad because I remember him guarding Wemby, and I was amazed with what
Chet.
he did. And Chet, and like he has positional versatility on the defensive end. He has moments on offense where he hits like a big three or like a couple threes in a row, but you can't necessarily let that cloud your perception of him when overall the product's not there night to night. And I start to think about what the options, possession to possession. And I just start to think about the roads that lead to Peyton either like going to another team or what that looks like. And I'm not necessarily opposed to that outcome, but I don't know.
But we'll just see if they make a decision sooner than later. Like, don't let it get too ugly. Don't give him a 4-year deal. I would be opposed to that because he has not shown enough for Denver to make that kind of long-term commitment. That's why I think a 2+1 with a team option on that last year makes the most sense for Denver. It doesn't make sense for Peyton.
Yeah, I was like, would he just deny that?
That's why you would increase the annual value, right? And I think Jake Coyne would probably agree with me because he went really extreme on the years versus annual value argument because he thinks like we should do like 3 years 90 or 3 years 100 for Christian Braun, and I'm like, whoa, because I would rather like I think it depends on the type of player, and there are certain types of players you want to commit to longer term, and try to get a lower number. And then probably that's like a fine rule of thumb, and then you exclude some section of players that you would want to commit to. But that's what I'd be looking at for Peyton.
The anxiety of longer contracts is real, and I get wanting to like find the right balance between paying more for it and not having to worry too much about it being so long. Or there's so many players with their contracts, the years just start looking very daunting when you look down the line, and you don't want to be in that situation.
Would we be in the second apron for sure? Basically, I'm saying you would want to stay under the second apron, but if Christian's contract is that much lower than I thought it was going to be 2 months ago, then you have a little bit more flexibility. The exact numbers like don't matter to me as much than like staying like within those ranges.
Yeah, I don't think they would let the Nuggets get there. They just said it was like a hard cap, so they won't let us get to the second apron.
Well, no, they did. It was a hard cap. Well, they said that they were not scared of the second apron, but they were nervous about what it could do to them. Yes. Right? You have to be very, very careful in the language that you use. I can actually just double check here. Second apron. I think the Nuggets have, it's like $45 million is what they could pay between Christian. The thing is, if they got off of Zeke's money, that opens up a ton more flexibility in this conversation, but I don't see how that happens.
Stretch provision.
No, we're not doing
It's all the rage right now.
Ugh, maybe we should do that. How long can you stretch a contract out for, potentially?
I don't actually know the length that you can stretch it, or if there's like a limit or how that gets settled for how much per year. I just felt like teams wouldn't touch a stretch provision with a 10-foot pole, and now everyone's doing it. It doesn't matter the cost.
Honestly, here's the thing. I'm looking at the numbers right now. If they want to pay Peyton, they have to trade Zeke. Because right now, as of right now, they're only $22 million projected under the second apron next year. And that's like all going to go to Christian. Now, you could say, let's take Jonas's money off the books. Even then, that's probably not enough to pay Peyton like a number that it'll take unless you take him to restricted free agency and just kind of force his hand without trading Zeke. It's not a great contract. Not a great contract, folks. All right. We've talked enough about Peyton and Christian's contracts for now. We'll talk more about them probably even before anything is actually signed, because it is a very interesting and dramatic question with these rookie scale extensions. If you've made it this far, we really, really do appreciate you guys that make it to the end of these really long streams. If you do like our content, please remember to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, as well as the notification bell. Our social links are in the description. And always remember that winning is fun and losing sucks, especially losing in negotiations.